1. So, things getting knocked over, doors getting knocked on at exactly 3:05, 3 times in a row like clockwork, with no one outside. A random knick-knack getting thrown to the floor while we were watching. We're all sort of normal growing up. Over time, with a handful of blessings, cleansings, and whatever else my family could think of, we started to ignore what we experienced. The only thing that helped, to be honest. But there were times it would get out of hand, a frame lifted up off the wall and threw itself across the room, aiming itself right at my mother's face. If she didn't move in time, it could have hit her. Boxes would get thrown down in the basement at us that were clearly out of reach. Something would be waiting at the top of the stairs before bedtime, making me and my siblings not want to go into our rooms, better yet to sleep. The feeling of someone putting pressure on you while trying to walk up or down stairs, making it feel as if a small person were trying to shove you down them. As we got older, we learned to ignore almost all of it, but I always felt like it swayed towards me. I'm the middle of 5 kids, so I always shared a room with my youngest sister, so she was a witness to a bunch of the weird stuff that would happen in our room or to me. Some nights I would wake up to my sleep paralysis demon holding me down, to find out my sister saw it too. Or have my covers whipped off me in the middle of the night. Another time, something that deeply disturbs me. My birdcage flew off the top of my dresser in broad daylight at me, full force, killing one of my parakeets. After that, I didn't keep the other in my room, although we had cats. That's why they stood in there. The other one was safer with them than in my room. Sage and frankincense were a common thing burned in my house in retaliation. Glasses of water in every corner of the house, accessible, candle cleanses, etc. My youngest sister even kept a bottle of holy water handy, even if we weren't all that religious, just to be safe. I've even left the state years after to visit a friend who moved away from military. And the whole time I visited the base, I had people telling me they thought they saw a man behind me or someone standing over me. My friend even happened to see a shadow over me when I was asleep. But at that point, that was the worst of it. No more pushing me or holding me down, still always uneasy. No more throwing things, well, not nearly as much, maybe once in a blue. I was probably about 20, 21 at that point, and now going on 29. I have a little calico kitty, kind of reversed colors, mainly black, named Layla. Sweet baby fluff, always stalks me whenever I'm home, and is rarely not with me. And today I came to realize something. I've had Layla since she was born, so for 7 years now, and there's this one weird thing that she constantly does around 2:30 to 3 a.m., which never bothered me because when I sleep she normally comes and lays on me. Or my girlfriend. But then, wakes up and goes and sits outside my door and stares for the whole time, and works her way back and is in bed by 3:30, mewing and begging for pets. She's done this since I can remember. I've come to realize she's been watching over us, right before Layla came to live with us. It was a bit of a long move, so she stood with my mom for a little while so we can settle first. We would hear loud bangs and noises and just assume it was the downstairs neighbors, or someone slamming a car door. As though we didn't know it was coming from inside our apartment. I had a feeling for a while, but I did what I was used to and ignored it, brushed it off. And it was recurring, too. So let me start with this to let you know how I got to this conclusion. Since my girlfriend and I moved in together, she's been noticing stuff in our cams. Don't live in a safe neighborhood, and the people who live and work in our apartment complex are probably just as shady, so they are very needed. We notice little things floating around in the cams, setting off the motion sensors here and there. I chalked it up to floaties. Dust, cat hair, etc. Just to calm her down, but then we started checking more and seeing fog. In the middle of our living room, consistently around the same time Layla is staring off into space, out in the hall. I always just called her a space case, just thinking she was my little weirdo cat doing weirdo cat things. This has happened several times in a row at this point, where we notice, but it's been more obvious the more we see Layla alone at home in camera, and how she acts around me when we see these floaties or fog. I watched it pass over my couch and move my back slightly, and you see Layla in the corner on 2 feet, watching what me and my girlfriend clearly see on camera. My fucking cat has been watching this thing that I'm pretty sure followed me across country multiple times, and I don't know what to think about it. But my girlfriend and I have been more on edge recently, and I've been trying to figure out how to keep this thing from acting up and get it to leave. Sage cleansings haven't helped much, and I'm not sure what to do to get rid of this thing. If anyone has advice in cleansing rituals, or even little things I can do to try and get this thing out of my life for good, that would be splendid. To try and keep it light, we joke around when we see the odd things and say it was Kyle, what me and my girlfriend named the ghost. But in all honesty, I'm still uneasy with the whole situation. I'm just thinking back to what I used to experience. It scares me what this thing might do if it's still around. So any advice is appreciated. Thanks. 2. My father's side of our family owns a large old mansion in the countryside, where I used to spend pretty much every single summer with my brother and grandparents, up until I was about 15. The house was built in the early 1900s, and it still has most of its original furniture, such as sofas, rocking chairs, and tables, as well as some old, some might say creepy, photographs on the walls. The house was built to be my grandfather's home, office, and reception, as he was a high-ranking government official in my country. I always loved spending time there during my childhood, and I still do like visiting there some summers to go see my parents who use the place as their summer cottage nowadays. The place is great. The house has 2 private beaches and a huge property where me and my brother always explored the woods as kids. Even though I've enjoyed most of my time there, I, for some reason as a kid, was always very afraid to go sleep before my older brother or grandparents also came upstairs where all the bedrooms were. I remember that up until I was around 8 or 9 years old, I often used to have this recurring, very realistic nightmare, where there was a young woman in very old-looking clothes, sitting on the double bed that was across the bedroom from me and my brother's bunk bed. She never did anything hostile or scary, but just sat there under a small reading lamp that we had on at nights, because me and my brother were afraid to sleep in the dark, and it really freaked me out. The dream felt so real that because of it, I always refused to look toward that bed when alone in the room. Instead, I always had my head under the blanket until my brother also came up. One time, when I was about 8 or 9 years old, and as usual, really afraid to go upstairs and sleep alone, I was by myself in the bedroom and couldn't fall asleep. I started crying, hidden under the blanket, and said out loud something along the lines of, "Please leave me alone, I'm scared of you." After that, I literally never had that nightmare again. When I told my grandma about this, she told me to not be afraid of any ghosts that I might encounter, as none of them were evil, and all probably used to be our relatives. She also added that she has seen some too, but refused to tell me about them. My grandpa, on the other hand, refused to talk to me about the subject at all, other than saying that he doesn't believe in ghosts and would like to see one someday. There's a ton of creepy stories from the house, but this one is the spookiest encounter I've had myself. 3. So a little backstory. I moved with my boyfriend to his hometown, and he bought a house that was in the family. His dad built this house for my boyfriend's grandmother, and his dad is even our neighbor. Fun stuff. Well, his dad built the house about 20 to 30 years ago. Nobody has ever lived in that house besides the grandmother and her youngest druggy son. She wasn't doing good in the end, was losing her memory and eventually passed away. If she passed away in the house, we are unsure of. My boyfriend doesn't want to know, they were very close. Well, fast forward to about a year or 2 ago. We are sitting on the couch watching TV, and he is playing a fighting game on the smaller TV. We have 2 dogs, a corgi I've had since he was a puppy, and a skittish mutt we rescued from the local shelter. There is a bookshelf against the wall to the right of us, and I am sitting on my boyfriend's right, so I am the closest one to the bookshelf. Our living room connects right into the dining room and kitchen, so the dog's water bowl is against the wall. Our rescue goes over to the water and gets something to drink, and comes and stands in front of the bookshelf just looking around and wagging his tail. This is where it gets weird. I had this sudden sensation to look over at him. I can't tell you what or why, but it's almost like a magnet that I had to look over. Right when I looked over, a black mist appeared behind my dog. It looked like an arm. From your shoulder down to your fingertips. The arm ever so slowly reached for my dog and gently touched the top of his butt and disappeared. My dog freaked out, skittish, jumped forward and looked up behind him and then looked at me. I reassured him I saw it too. My boyfriend looked over and asked, "What the hell?" And I told him. He didn't believe me, of course. 1 or 2 years later he had his own experience, and I retold him this. He believes me now. Then I was unemployed for about 3 months, so I was home alone. I've always been a little cautious of the paranormal and tend to be very sensitive to it. I'm not scared when I am in that house alone, but I am more aware. I was walking down our long hallway to get a drink, and when I turned to go back in the bedroom, my corgi was standing in the doorway to the hallway. All of a sudden, he squared up and started barking at nothing. I asked, "What is it, boy?" He looked up at me and I started walking. I pulled my phone out to record. He was barking and kind of jumping the whole time. Then ran out in front of me and went into the bedroom and stopped. He looked around, back at me, then got in his bed. I don't want to think it's my boyfriend's grandmother. From what he says, she was an old-fashioned Southern Christian lady who loved everyone. But I am openly non-religious, and we're living together without being married. I don't feel threatened at all, not yet. But I think it might be her. 4. Growing up, you hear a lot of ghost stories from your relatives, some outlandish, like my mother telling me of small pint-sized murderous mermaids in Mexico, to my dad telling me Native American ghost stories that were all too eerie to let me sleep at night. Well, I didn't experience anything paranormal until I was older and began working grave shift in a retirement home in Oregon called Farmington Square. I have never in my life seen so much going on at one place, how active it was with the unseen after the lights went out. It started just after a couple of weeks working with the elderly. He only needed assistance, not the more severe buildings with residents who had full-blown Alzheimer's. I would have the task of setting up the whole dining room area at night while casually having rounds to check up on the residents. On one of these nights, as I set up the dining room tables, I heard clear as day a high-pitched child's voice saying, "Hello?" I was deep in thought while doing the routine that I barely turned over my shoulder to say hi back, only to stop abruptly and realize it's 2 a.m. in a retirement home. I turned quickly and saw no one in the dark corner. I put everything down in a robotic manner, not daring to look back again, and power walked into the living room area where the medtech was snoring on the couch. I didn't want to wake him up, so I pulled out my phone and began texting whoever was up on Facebook, wanting so desperately to distract my brain of the voice I just heard. I forcefully carried on with my shift, and was all too happy to go home and forget later that morning. Come my weekend, I did my usual COD online with a friend of mine into the late hours. We talked regularly, and I usually fell asleep with him on call. I never told him about the encounter at work, because I feel like talking about the paranormal, you are only exposing yourself to more activity. On that particular night, we were playing and it got late. I told him I was heading to bed, and he asked if he could call me while I slept, since he was still wide awake. I agreed to call him and fell asleep shortly after. Everything seemed fine that night. The next morning I woke up with a text from him saying, "Call me when you read this, I have something to tell you." It was unlike him to leave vague messages like this without further explanation. I called him and he ended up telling me that about 40 to 50 minutes after I fell asleep, he heard my door open and close. and after a bit of shuffling noises in my room followed by a child's voice speaking close to me, but he couldn't make out words. I felt a cold chill and so uncomfortable in my surroundings. I didn't know how to react. I instantly knew that whatever I had heard from the dining room area that night at work had followed me home. Everything felt heavier and darker in my home, and I felt like I was walking on eggshells. More things happened at my work following after that incident, and I just couldn't bear it anymore and quit only 2 months after working there. That place is really haunted. Whatever followed me left me alone after that, and I have not had the same happen since. 5. Backstory. I moved in with my boyfriend over 2.5 years ago into a house he had only lived in for a few months before I joined. Living here, it was easy to tell there was heavy energy, especially in the basement. I've always known there was a ghost in the house, and when strange noises began happening, it wasn't much of a surprise. Now, the floor plan of the house is a little strange, so please bear with me. The door to the basement is located in the downstairs bathroom. This bathroom obviously wasn't always a bathroom, and that is why it is located as a shoulder room to the kitchen. I'm hoping that makes sense. We always made jokes about the ghost, but it never made moves to harm us in any way. My boyfriend would slightly disagree and bring up the one time he was going to the restroom and the door opened on its own. Also, every now and again, usually at night, the spirit would inhabit the kitchen and make noises in there. Once, just to show my friends, I brought them into the basement, and they all agreed they could feel the spirit too. After returning back upstairs, a few of my friends claimed they felt uneasy, headache, nausea, etc. And out of anger, I confined the spirit to the basement. I practiced witchcraft. After that, the spirit retreated. Sometime later, I insisted that the spirit leave the house, and to our surprise, it did. For months, we haven't had any issue and have felt no presence. The current problem. Something has come into our home once again, more active than the last. For the last month, noises have started again, even to the point where I'm thinking I'm hearing talking. Multiple members of the witchcraft community have agreed that the energy of the world is off, and some have even gone so far as to claim there has been a rip in the veil. Whether you believe in that type of stuff is up to you, but I give you the information nonetheless. This entity is different. I don't feel its presence often, nor do I understand what it is. One of my close friends has even witnessed what it has done before. She had come over to my house, and while I was talking I had heard, in the downstairs bathroom, a glass jar that was sitting on the porcelain toilet move. We had stayed silent for a few moments before I turned and asked if she heard it, and she said yes. As of the moment I am writing this at 5 a.m., I am laying in bed with my boyfriend in our pitch-black house. He is asleep. I was listening to music on my phone, and during a pause where no music was playing, from all the way upstairs, I heard the doorknob on the laundry room door located in the kitchen turn back and forth violently. It is an unmistakable sound. I'm quite rattled about it, but it's not worth waking up my boyfriend for. I worry about what this new entity is or what it might be. Any and all advice or comments are welcome. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 181. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Well, you guys get this on Friday, and as you do, we are now in lockdown in the UK because some people just don't know when to listen when they've been told to do things that are for their own good and for the good of their fellow human beings. With kind of an inevitability, really, and of course more places will end up in the same situation, but ultimately it's for the best. It will help us recover quicker in the long run. Well, we all know what's going on in the world, and you didn't come here to hear me ramble about that. Unless you did, in which case, well, there we go, I just rambled about that. Now, let's see. Thanks very much to those of you who joined me for the streams. It was Saturday, and there was a bonus one on Monday. Wasn't expecting to stream on Monday, but I just had the urge. Something about this current situation makes me want to stream more. but I'll limit it to the occasional bonus, and I should have one in either Saturday or Sunday. I'm not sure when. It's going to depend on what I've got to do. By the time you hear this, Glitch Monthly should have gone up, and that's why I did it on Saturday last week, because I needed the extra time to work on that. So I might move to Sunday. I'll talk to the people that usually have a preference for certain days on the old Discord server there, and we'll see what's what. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.